Today's guest is Fritz Gilbert from the Retirement Manifesto. We're going to discuss the transition into early retirement and how Fritz was able to retire early. Welcome to Richer Soul, Life Beyond Money, the last baby step. Imagine it's 12 months from now and you've achieved your major goals. How does it feel to be in the best shape of your life? To wake up energized, full of energy, excited about the day? What's it like to have great relationships and friends who support you? How does it feel like to have an excess of money to be able to make the choices you want? Imagine being connected to the universe and have it provide everything you desire. Your past does not dictate your future. The only thing holding you back from this vision is you. I help people live the life of their dreams, and you can see how on richersoul.com by looking under the coaching call tab to hear actual coaching sessions. If you've not listened to episodes 1 through 9, I encourage you to go back and listen to the framework behind Richer Soul and how to create abundance in your life. You can also find all the show notes for this episode on the website. I've started to send out a monthly email, and you can sign up while you're there. In the short monthly email, I will share the best articles of the month, let you know about upcoming episodes, and also share a little bit of wisdom that I've learned this month. I also share the most interesting articles I read every week on Facebook at facebook.com/Richer Soul. It's harder to keep wealth than it is to make it. Once you come up with a system to create wealth, you need to come up with a system to keep it. If you'd like a second opinion on your financial plans or worried you're missing something out, check out the SWOT analysis. Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats at richersoul.com/SWOT. The power of compound interest is immense. We're going to discuss it in today's show. A simple way to calculate how fast your money will double is the rule of 72. If you take a look at the return you expect to make and divide it in 72, you will see how fast your money doubles. An 8% return would be 72 divided by 8, which equals 9, and lets you know that it will take 9 years for your money to double. A 10% rate of return allows your money to double in 7.2 years. Why is this important? Because over time, each double doubles. $1 doubles to $2, $2 to $4, $4 to $8, and $8 to $16, and so on. The key is to have the time for the doubles to work. My kids have Roth IRAs, which we started for my son at the age of 14. If he earns a 10% rate of return, he gets an extra double over someone starting at 21, 4 times for someone starting at 28, and 8 times what someone starting at 35 does. There is no time like the present to start saving and harness the power of compounding. Our guest today is Fritz Gilbert, the founder of Retirement Manifesto, the 4th fastest growing personal finance blog in the world. The site is dedicated to helping people achieve a greater retirement. He is planning on retiring in 2018 at the age of 55 with his wife in a cabin in the Southern Appalachian Mountains. He's had a diverse career during 30 years in corporate America and currently works as a commodity trader negotiating international trade deals. Let's meet him and hear his story. Welcome to Richer Soul, Fritz. It's great to have you join us today.
Rocky, I am honored to be on your podcast. You and I are so aligned on so many things, and I'm really honored to be a guest on your show. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Oh, you're welcome. This is going to be a wonderful conversation. I think we're going to agree on a lot of things. We'll see if we can find some disagreements, too.
Yeah, well, we'll see. It's interesting. You think back to how long you and I have known each other. I mean, it was probably, 3 or 4 years ago when we came across each other somewhere in social media, and, you were talking about starting this podcast, and I've got to say, you're hitting 50 episodes now. You're getting some big names. You're doing a really good job with it. And I'm happy for you. I'm just ecstatic to be a part of your show in a small part. So thank you very much, and let's get going.
You're welcome. All right, so we always start at the beginning. What was it like when you were growing up, and how much did your family and school teach you about money?
Yeah, that's most of us get, whether we realize it or not, we get our education from the environment we're raised in. And I was very fortunate to have a family, more my father, I think, than my mom. My dad was the money guy in the family, and he's still alive today. We have a great relationship. He's 84 now. And we didn't really talk a lot about money, but he just epitomized good choices. He was a college professor, modest income. My mom was a teacher in the public schools. Even though they were very solidly middle class, they were careful with their money. I remember I always wanted Levi jeans, and I was never able to get Levi jeans. I always had to get Penny's plain pockets from JCPenney's, and I always wanted Levi's, But so we were always frugal, but we had what we needed, and we had great memories with both of them being teachers. We would take off for the summer. We had an old Volkswagen camper van, and we'd drive to the West Coast, and we'd spend a 3-week vacation every summer. We had incredible family memories. But if you think about the way they did it in a very frugal manner. The teachings I got as a child were more from observation than direct lessons. As I've matured and gotten older, even now I talk to my dad every week, and we talk about finances. We talk about my early retirement. We talk about, my transition to retirement. It's matured to where now it's kind of two men talking to each other about finances, and I'm really blessed to have a great relationship. Unfortunately, my mom passed away 10 years ago, but my dad and I still continue to have a very good relationship, and we talk about money in addition to a lot of other things. Yeah, it was a good upbringing.
Oh, that's wonderful to hear. And for your kids, are you doing anything different to teach them about money?
Yeah, we've got one daughter. She's 23. As we were raising her, obviously I was pretty focused on the financial side, and I thought a lot about my childhood, and I thought about what's the right way to introduce her to the concepts at an age appropriate level. And all through her life, we've tried to obviously live a life of financial responsibility, and yet also spending the money on the things that were important. We've always tied to our church. We've always gone on nice vacations together. We've built memories more so than material goods. And I think in terms of the financial teachings, I've probably focused more on being an example, like my dad was to me. But I think we also, as she's gotten older, we've had some very good discussions with her. And when she started her first job as a police officer, we set her up with a Vanguard Roth. I walked her through, and I actually set it up for her, but we were together. I said, okay, what you need to do is on your very first paycheck, you need to be automatically paying yourself first. We set it all up, and we automated it. So even if she doesn't totally understand it at this point, she's doing the right things, and I'm hoping that education will continue to come as she goes through life.
And so you kind of bring up 2 points. The first is, I always say, kids never listen to you. They listen to what you do. And so your actions, in a sense, are what are going across. And it sounds like both from your dad and the way you're doing things, you're doing the actions that they listen to. So congratulations on that. And for me, and I'm sure similar story for you, but if you start that retirement account with your first paycheck, you are destined to become a millionaire. It's just an automatic thing if you just keep doing it. And even if you make bad investment choices, you're still just automatically destined to get there just because of the simple math.
I couldn't agree more. The Automatic Millionaire from David Bach and many others, the power of compounding. I mean, we know the principles. The trick is, how do you get a young person to recognize that, appreciate it, and sacrifice for it? And what we taught our daughter was that the way to do it is to do it before you even realize you've got the money, right? Before that first paycheck comes in, automate it, live on what's left, and that's the amount of money you have. You're right. I mean, that is, without a doubt, that is the path to financial security later in life. It just takes time.
And that's the thing. It's simple. It's really not that hard as long as you do it first, because then you don't have to figure out where the money comes from. And it's not exciting, but it's guaranteed to work. And unfortunately, too often, I think we get caught up in the excitement and the shiny objects, and there's no need to do that. That's one of the lessons I've learned.
That's right. There's something my dad said to me that I've always remembered is it's not hard to get wealthy. You simply have to spend less than you make and do it for a long time. There's wisdom there. I wouldn't say it's easy, but I would say it is simple, right? There's a difference. And the trick is take that 15% deduction right off the top and learn to live on the rest before you've ever gotten the addiction of spending that level of income, and you'll make things work. I agree. It's not hard, but it's not easy.
And if you want to speed it up, just increase the 15%. The higher the 15% goes, 20, 25, 30, 35, the program works, the faster you can retire.
That's right. I mean, we all probably know Mr. Money Mustache and his infamous article on exactly the math of early retirement. You look at a lot of people in the fire community today, some of these guys are saving north of 50%, and some of them are retiring in their 30s. I mean, there's no reason you can't do it that way. It may not be traditional, but it's math. It's savings rate and years. And the higher the savings rate, the fewer the years. So, yeah, you're right. It's pretty straightforward.
Absolutely. So you're 55 now, and you're getting ready to retire, but it seems like this journey to retirement has taken you a few years and maybe some twists and turns in your thoughts. I'd love to hear a little bit more about that journey and what you found out.
Oh, boy, how much time do you have, Rocky?
We got lots of time.
It's interesting. I've thought about this a lot, and I think it's played out pretty much as I would have designed it if I would have had a grand design. I didn't have a grand design, but my thinking all along has been balance, right? And it's balance between frugality versus balance against living life today. We're certainly not the frugal, fire, get out by 35 type of mentality. There's nothing wrong with that. I totally support it. It makes sense. At the same time, we're not the person who doesn't save anything and is sitting there at 50 going, what am I going to do? We've always targeted a balance. I mentioned earlier, we take vacations every year with our daughter. We've traveled internationally. I've got frequent flyer miles, so we've been able to do it relatively cheaply. But we've always prioritized it's okay to spend money on memories. Because of that, I'm getting out at 55. From a societal norm standpoint, that's still early, but it's not as early as I could have done it if we would have been obsessively targeting the early retirement. So I've always tried to kind of do both. Live life, but save aggressively. Yeah, there have been ebbs and flows along the way. I've gotten relocated quite a bit with my job. We've had houses that you make money on, you lose money on. There's all those types of things. But I think the general principle has been we've always lived below our means. We've always been really careful on the big obligations, the house, the cars primarily. And we've never really gotten caught up in the lifestyle inflation and materialism that a lot of people get caught up in that causes them to not be able to retire in their mid-50s. So it's been a balance. In general, I'm content with it. I think it's been a good journey. I don't think there's a lot that I would have changed about it.
So what are you going to do next?
Well, in 184 days, if I were counting, not that I am, I plan on retiring. I took a break over Thanksgiving. I wrote a blog post about this. It was called A 10-Day Retirement. I intentionally took our time over Thanksgiving. The work email was slow. I was able to really disconnect a little bit. I really took time to try to think about exactly that question. I guess, to me, the opportunity that financial independence brings is almost staggering, right? It's freedom to do whatever you choose to do. But with that freedom comes a bit of an obligation to determine what you're going to do. The worst thing that can happen is you run on the treadmill for 35 years, you hit the end, and your retirement's a mess, right? And that happens to some people. I'm being very intentional. I'm spending a lot of time right now thinking about what those years post-work are going to be like. At this point, it's a combination. It's mainly giving back. My wife and I, we live up in the mountains of North Georgia. We moved up there a couple years ago, sold our house in the city, downsized to our cabin. It's all been part of the plan. But in those couple years that we've been up there, we're being intentional about getting engaged in the community, getting involved in charity work, doing some dog rescue, getting involved in a church, finding ways that we can start developing things now. There's a photography club that I've been in communications with, finding connections now that are going to be avenues that we can explore as we get into full-time retirements. It's really going to be focused on building a purpose around things that excite me, that aren't financially oriented, but they can result in goodwill to man. You know, it's that type of thinking. I don't know exactly what it's going to look like yet. You know, I'm still working through it, but that's kind of where I'm at mentally, is thinking through that type of an opportunity.
It's good you're thinking about it. I think too often people just want to get out of work, or they make a decision and they don't think through the ramifications of the decision that they're making. And in this case, you know, I've read a lot of your work, and it sounds like you've constantly tested things to see if they were what you expected, and you're trying different things out to find how your puzzle pieces are going to fit together in retirement.
You're spot on. It's an overused phrase, but it's that whole retirement to something instead of retirement from something. You know, you're running to the future. I look at retirement as a starting line, not a finishing line, right? It's the point in your life where you can now do whatever you want to do. And I think the people that get into trouble, and I'm no expert on this. I mean, I read a lot. I'm a voracious reader, but the stuff that I've read, the people that get into trouble in retirement are the people that really haven't thought about it before they get there. They're racing through work. They're, you know, doing all their conference calls and their meetings. And then one day they just stop going to work, and they haven't really spent the time to think about what that means. So I'm being really intentional, mainly through my blog. I mean, my blog is something, I started that really, that's kind of another one of these experiment things. I started a couple of years ago just as a place to play around and see if this is something that I'm interested in, not unlike your podcast, right? It's something that you can do on your own. The internet's an amazing place, and it's something that can potentially build and give you a purpose after retirement. As I've gone through that journey, the blog's been a really great place for me to kind of lay out my thinking about this whole evaluation of what's your life going to be after retirement. So it's been rewarding.
They keep talking about living longer and longer. And if you knew you were going to live another 50 years, would you still make this choice, or do you think it would be somewhat different?
I think I would. I mean, obviously, you know, you'd have to look at the financial side. I mean, it's not the most important part of retirement, but it's the first part that everybody thinks about. And, you know, obviously the longevity risk is a big factor. But aside from that, I guess the way I look at life, Rocky, is if you can get to the point where work is optional, then I guess each person has to make their own decision. But in my case, I find it kind of depressing if I can't find something more fulfilling to do with my time than to work for somebody else for a paycheck when I can do anything that I choose to do. So to me, I probably, even if I knew I was going to live another 50 years, financial questions aside, I still think I would try to spend as much of my life as I could in a non-mandatory work environment, because life is short and we should try to live it to the fullest. And if we can do that without having the obligation of the 9 to 5, then, you know, my view is, yeah, we should pursue that.
And it may very well happen that you do. So
yeah, no, you're right. Yeah.
From with all the technological changes that are coming and all the medical changes, and I know you're in good shape. You swim a lot, and so if you keep your health up, there's a good chance you'll go the distance.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, let's pause on that for a second, if you don't mind. I think one of the things that people probably, they hear and they kind of say, yeah, I should do something about that. But, the whole physical fitness thing for people our age, it's a huge consideration because, part of the reason we're retiring early is I want to get as many healthy years in as I can so we can go, we're going to get a fifth wheel. We're going to go visit the national parks. We might work some summer jobs at national parks just for the experience. Who knows? But the point being, you've only got a certain number of years where you're really physically capable of doing anything you want to do. Man, take some time and energy now to get into a regular fitness routine to extend those years. Number one, you'll enjoy the years a lot more. Number two, you'll have more of them. So, focusing on physical fitness as a retirement preparation angle, I think it's probably not something that enough people take seriously. And it is a big part of my life. I swam. It's December 5th, 6th as we talk. I swam on December 4th. So just 2 nights ago, the water was 49 degrees in my apartment here in the city, the city apartment in the pool. But I was out there swimming because I wanted to try to get a December swimming. So I really try to stretch my season. I get invigorated by the cold water swimming, and I've intentionally pursued that as a way to keep myself motivated to stay in shape. So, look for ways that work for you. It can be as simple as a walk. There's a really good book I read, Younger Next Year. And it's basically around the concept that if you do 45 minutes of moderate exercise, as easy as a brisk walk, if you do 45 minutes of exercise, 6 days a week, medically or physically, you should be just as capable in your early 70s as you are in your early 50s. And it's been medically proven. It's written by a PhD. And that kind of motivated me to get a little bit more serious about the physical fitness side. So,
do you do anything else besides swimming?
I do. I run. I've been a runner for 25, 30 years. I'm slowing down as I get older. I walk the hills, but, I still get out there and run. And I mountain bike a bit. I got a post coming out next week about a mountain biking trip that a friend and I just did up in the North Georgia mountains. And that's something that I think as I get into retirement, I'm probably going to take advantage of that a little bit more. I really enjoy getting in the woods on a bike. You get the physical workout. You get the beauty of the mountains. It's exhilarating when you're doing the downhill run, after you've climbed the mountain. So, yeah, I try to mix it up and do a lot of things.
And, at the end of the day, if you want to do those kinds of things in retirement, you have to be in shape. And
exactly.
That's the reality of it. I do something a little different. I lift 3 days a week, and I lift heavy weights.
Good for you.
The physiology behind it is by doing that, you actually build stronger bone structure, and you set off a whole set of changes within your body that just kind of revitalize you and keep you young. And then I've started a new program, which is more around movement, which is a lot of flexibility and moving in ways that we don't normally move, in the sense that as we get older, we're more apt to fall, more apt to, a slight off-balance situation, and next thing you've got a broken hip. I want to be in the type of situation that none of that affects me. And so,
and you're smart to do the weights. I mean, everything I've been reading, I'm more of a cardio guy, and I'm trying to focus. Actually, I've got a goal right now between now and when I retire, because I'm still stuck at this apartment in the city. My goal is to try to integrate more of the upper body, overall body, but heavyweight repetitions into the workout, because I do recognize the importance of that. And as you get older, I think the benefits of lifting some weights, it sounds kind of weird, but in reality, that's actually more, I think, beneficial to us as we age than the straight cardio. No doubt about it.
Absolutely. Building that muscle mass. I mean, and it comes down, literally, you can get away with 3 movements, which is squat, bench, and deadlift. If you can just do those 3, they give you the foundation for, they get you the 80-20 rule. So, that 20% gets you 80% of the result.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. I'd not heard that. So I will have to try to do those 3 and incorporate them into my workouts. Thank you for that.
Oh, you're welcome. And you'd be surprised. Like, I just keep getting leaner and stronger, and it's amazing.
Well, I know when I met you, you're clearly a physically fit guy, and it shows. So it seems to be working for you. So kudos to you, and I'll weave some of that in, because cardio can go so far, but ultimately it's about your ability to continue to enjoy life, and the physical requirements on your body are more, especially as you get older and you start losing muscle mass and bone density and all that kind of stuff. Those are the objectives that we should be working for, and whatever best fulfills that objective is what we should be doing. So definitely weight training is something that I need to focus more intently on.
And I'll send you some info on that. Yeah, please do. You didn't see me 6 years ago when I was 50 pounds heavier. I couldn't run to save my life.
Congratulations.
So yeah, I figured out the system, and I executed, and it works well. So it's good from that standpoint. So with your blog, I think you originally started out, you were talking a lot about the money side of it, and now you've kind of shifted gears. What's that all about?
Yeah, it's interesting, Rocky. As I was thinking about starting a blog, I've been a personal finance, I would say I'm a passionate hobbyist for 20 or 30 years. I read Money Magazine when I was in my 20s, right? I've read this stuff for decades. And I really thought my focus would be around the financial aspects of life and everything else. And I did a lot of those articles, the importance of tracking your net worth. And I did a building block series on some of the basics, the stuff we've talked about earlier, compounding interest, starting early. And probably 80% of my articles in the first 6 to 12 months were really focused on what I'll call the hard aspects of retirement planning, the numbers, the financials, the retirement cash flow analysis, all that stuff. And after a while, I kind of worked through most of the big ticket items there. And I noticed as I was reading and studying on what really makes a successful retirement, more and more I started realizing through what I was reading, which was influencing what I was thinking, which started influencing what I was writing, is that the softer side of retirement planning is probably an area that is focused on less, but it's actually more important. And so I kind of made a shift, and I'm very transparent in my writing. I just write about what I'm thinking and what my wife and I are going through as we prepare for retirement. But once you kind of get the financial side sorted out, it became apparent to me that focusing on these softer issues was actually more important. And I didn't do it by design. It just kind of happened. It's where my head was. It was what we were facing as we went through this transition in our own lives. And I would say now I'm probably the other extreme. I probably write 80% of my posts about the non-financial aspects of life and retirement planning. And I've enjoyed it. I go with wherever I am in my stage in life, and I've seen that natural shift to thinking about the non-financial things, and I think that's good. As I think about what really matters for a successful retirement, I think I'm going in the direction that means the most to me, and hopefully means the most to my readers.
And I think that same applies throughout life. Even when you're younger, once you've got your finances down and you have the ability to make choices, focusing on the softer side of life and those choices is possible pre-retirement. And throughout life, if you're smart enough to make those choices as a young person instead of chasing the almighty buck.
Yeah. And, you think about the people that you've seen that are maybe a little bit off balance, or it typically, life is about balance and about a holistic view and, spirituality. I'm a Christian, those types of elements of your life have to be equally or more important than the financial, and vice versa. I think all these different areas of your life have to be treated with some level approach and even-mindedness and a view on the broad picture of what you're going through. That ultimately, I think, is where the people that have the most successful lives, the most fulfilling lives, I think, are the ones that focus on the broader aspects of their lives. So it kind of fits.
And so do you have certain pillars that you have come up with for what you think you need balance with, or are you still somewhat generalized in that area?
I'm not really written down something like that. I think just thinking on the spot as we talk, I think it's you need to focus on a purpose for your life that brings fulfillment to you, that is selfless. So focused on others is always better than focused on self. And I think an outward focus with a content spirit where you choose to be content, right? A lot of how we experience life, we're going deep here, Rocky, but a lot of how we experience life, I think, is really based on our mental perception and our choice of attitude towards it. So, I'm very conscious about choosing to be content, choosing to be, supportive and generous towards others. And again, I've not written down kind of here's my mission statement. So it is a more general philosophy, but it is around the more eternal aspects, the things that really matter, and focusing externally instead of internally, and making a conscious decision to be content with your situation. I think that probably wraps it up.
And is that something that has come to you later in life, or were you always like this?
I would say it's come later in life. I think as we mature, we recognize how trivial some of the things that many of us worry about really are. And I think we get a little bit higher level view of what matters in life. And I think in my life anyway, that's only come with age and maturity. And so I do think it's been something that, and probably my blog, because I write, probably 3 days a week. And I only publish one article a week, but I work on it probably 2 or 3 nights a week. And spending that much time introspectively thinking about, when you got to put something down in the written word, it really causes you to think, thousands of people are going to read this stuff. And it really makes you think about what's important and what matters and what do you want to dedicate this white space to in terms of the post you're working on. And I think it's been a culmination of the age and the blog and the, transition into retirement. You kind of put all those together in the pot and stir them up and put it on low heat for a while. And I think that's really what's driven me to kind of that realization.
And I think I've experienced something very similar over the years as well. And we had Roger Whitney on the other day, and he kind of talks about how in each stage of his life, he and his wife are both different people. From the 20s to the 30s to the 40s to the 50s, you continually change. So I guess with that, what do you wish your younger self would have known about that you know today? What advice would you give yourself when you were back in your 20s or maybe early 30s?
Yeah, that. By the way, before we leave the Roger Whitney, that's so funny that you mentioned him. I just had lunch with him today. He and I are pretty good friends, and he was in Atlanta where I live, and we got together for lunch. So that's pretty ironic, and I really respect Roger and his podcast and his way of thinking. And to add to your thought, and then I'll go back to the 20s and 30 questions you asked. But I don't think that process ever changes, right? As you're in your 50s, looking at your future, what you think is going to be important to you probably won't be. And that will continue to evolve as you go through life. So you have to, be adaptable and continue to evolve. But anyway, back to my 20s or 30s, I actually wrote a post to my daughter, and I'm going from the top of my head here, so I can't pull it out. But it was basically, six lessons to somebody in their early 20s. And a lot of that was probably, pulled from my thinking and what I wish I had known. But, there wasn't anything there that was earth-shatteringly different than what I did. If I was fortunate, I graduated college. My parents, because he was a college professor, he had a benefit that was a tuition exchange where you could go to other colleges for no cost, basically. And I applied and got into the program. So, long story short, I came out of college with no debt. I landed a good job, 45 days after I graduated, corporate job that I've been with the company 33 years. I started saving when I was 22 years old. So I think the basic premise I got right, I was lucky rather than good that things really worked out the way they did. If there were one thing I would probably change, and again, this isn't a big deal. I'm very content with the way our life has gone, but, probably starting with a more aggressive saving schedule earlier because of the, exponential power of compounding. those savings in the early years have such a huge impact, but even then, okay, fine. I might have retired a couple years earlier. It's not a huge life changer. That's probably the biggest thing to not have fully appreciated the power of compounding when I was in my early 20s.
And that is, it's an impressive power that works in multiple different directions in multiple different ways. When you go into debt, compounding works against you and it can snowball against you. And just even in our growth, in learning and improving ourselves, if we're just constantly doing the little things over and over again throughout time, then we grow as people, and that compounds as well. That allows you to have an amazing life as you grow.
And I would, not to interrupt, sorry, I would argue that it's also the same in reverse. Just like debt compounds to the negative, those character decisions compound to the negative, right? I mean, everything is a game of inches done over many, many, many years. And that compounding effect can either work for good or, my personal belief, it can work for bad. Whether it's financial or ethical, both areas in your life compound. And they can compound either up or they can compound down. So yeah, compounding is a phenomenal power that probably, I certainly didn't appreciate it when I was in my 20s. And it's only looking back that you can realize, wow, I really didn't think we were doing that much. And all of a sudden you've got, a seven-figure net worth, everything's going fine, but it's only because of that compounding that things really, really shake out the way they do.
And it's all small baby steps along the way. It's not like you're doing this massive change. If people just start taking small baby steps in whatever it is they want to achieve, the next thing you know, things just explode and progress.
Yeah. I'll tell you something that I found. I'd be interested in your take on this. One of the things that I was fortunate, somewhere in a Money Magazine article, probably somewhere, I think I was about 27 or 28 years old when I first started tracking our net worth. And I've always found it a very interesting, I only do it once a year. I do it at, December 31st after the year-end statements are published. I go in and update everything. But to me, just glancing at that once a year and seeing the impact that all of those decisions that you made through the course of the year have had on your net worth on an annual basis epitomizes exactly what you're talking about. The change in our status or, financial position or anything you want to say is a net effect of many, many, many small things that you do over the course of the year or the decades. And what I've found is by looking at this annual net worth update, it's weird, but as I'm going through the year and I'm facing a certain financial decision, I find myself thinking about what's the impact of this going to be on that net worth at the end of the year. You recognize in time that is a culmination of all of these minor decisions that you're making throughout the year. And that's the way it works. That's the math of it. And it really, really does come down to making good decisions every single day as you live your life, right? And yeah, of course you're going to make some mistakes. Everybody does. But in general, if you can get the majority of your decisions right and you hopefully get better in time, that's the secret. That's what it takes to be, financially successful anyway.
Absolutely. I've used Quicken since the early 90s, back when computers ran on DOS. And I can still graph all the way back and watching the network just grow over time. And I remember the first $10,000 was the hardest. The second 10,000 was easy. The first 100,000 was hard. The second 100,000 was easy. First million was hard. It took forever. The second million was easy. It's just amazing how that occurs and living through it and seeing it. And I think for people, hit those small milestones and you'll be surprised. Every time you hit a milestone, the ability to double what you just did is a fraction of what it took you to get there to begin with.
Yeah, you're right. And it's almost like a momentum thing. Once this ball gets rolling, it's kind of the snowball mentality. I guess rolling down the hill, it gets bigger and bigger on its own. But, I remember the first year that my net worth grew more than my entire income. And it's like, wow, that's amazing. I made more just by my money working for, those dollar bills, soldiers of dollar bills. I think one of the other podcaster calls it. Once you get that army doing the work for you, it's astonishing, and that's compounding, right? But it still amazes me looking at it now, in my mid 50s, on what impact that has over time. And you're right. You're exactly right. The doubling effect is it takes your breath away when you see the power of it.
That it does. I read a book a couple of years ago now. It was the Harvard Grant Study. And they interviewed people from Harvard. I think it started back in the 1920s. And every 10 years, they interviewed these men.
Fascinating.
A whole bunch of questions to see about what were going to be the success factors going forward and the driving forces and all of that. And I think it went all the way through their 80s. And it's funny because every 10 years they'd get interviewed, they'd remember things totally differently, and they'd have a totally different outlook on life.
Wow.
And it's funny how much, they wouldn't even remember some of the things that they said in the last interview. And it's just funny how much we change with every decade and how we grow and how some of the things you might think are going to be the drivers of success aren't necessarily the drivers of success.
Interesting. Really, actually, I'd be interested in that study. If you've got I don't know if you do show notes, put a link in the show notes or send me an email. I'd be very interested in reading that, because that's exactly the type of stuff that I love to consume. That to me, that type of stuff about what's important in life and learning from people that have gone before you. And if they're talking to people from their 20s to their 80s, I mean, what a wealth of information. That's a lifetime from multiple individuals of what's important and what drives success in life. That's a very interesting study. So I would be very interested in having a look at that.
It's a book. I think it's around 500 pages. It's a big, thick book.
Okay.
But we'll link to the book in the show notes. That's easy.
Good.
I can do that as well.
Good.
So do you find it hard to let go of work? I mean, too many people are defined by their work.
Yeah. You never know until you get there, I guess. And I'm still fully employed, and I appreciate my job. It's been a great career. I've been with the company for 33 years. I enjoy what I'm doing. But I think because I've spent so much time thinking about the transition, part of that naturally is recognizing the temporary nature of work, and the fact that, in 6 months, I mean, I'm planning on retiring in June of 18. In 6 months, that part of my life is done. And I think knowing that and thinking through it, I'm a bit philosophical, as you can probably tell from our chat here. I think, but I don't know, but I think that I've come to terms pretty well with letting go of work and focusing on the other aspects of life. Now, call me in 6 months and we'll see how it goes. But personally, I focused on thinking about that, and I think I'm in pretty good shape to let it go.
All right. It's something that I hear comes up, that people want to let go. And even when they can let go and they're ready to let go, that they struggle through that. And it's probably because they haven't thought through, which you've definitely done, is to think through about the future and the choices that you're making.
Yeah, I'll tell you two comments on that. One is a firsthand experience with a very good friend of mine who retired 2 years ahead of me, who did not do pre-thinking about it. He worked right up till the final day, meetings, conference calls, run into the airport, go. Next day he's done. And he said that he really had a difficult adjustment, as many people do. That's number one. Number two is I've read a lot of stuff that basically says just recognizing that inevitability and thinking about it and considering it and, mentally thinking about what you're going to do. But just that mental exercise of thinking about it has been proven through studies to be one of the most important things you can do as you're approaching retirement to ensure that that transition's not as disruptive. So obviously that's what I'm doing. So I've seen firsthand my friend who didn't do it, and he struggled. I've read about others who have thought about it and didn't struggle, and I'm trying to replicate the second group. But I don't know how it's going to turn out, right? I'm not there yet, but I'm doing everything I can to try to prepare for that mental shift from having a life that's kind of, your purpose is defined by your work. Suddenly it's not. And I think going into that blindly is a pretty dangerous way to go into retirement. It's better to think about it beforehand.
Do you think starting 10 years in advance would be helpful, or is that too far out?
Too far out.
Okay.
I'll tell you why. I probably started thinking aggressively about it maybe 4 years out. I had a couple friends that retired earlier. I was at maybe 50. And I was like, man, I can retire early. I can do this. And I think the more you get obsessed is too strong a word, but the more of your mental energy that you expend thinking about that, the less you enjoy your life as it exists today. The reality of it is you're going to work for 10 more years in your scenario. Let's say it's a 10-year horizon. You're going to be working for 10 more years. Expending energy on thinking about life after that 10 years kind of sucks the life out of those 10 years that you're thinking about it, right? Focus on the moment, focus on enjoying the time that you're alive and living and you're healthy and everything is good, right? Your family's together, your kids are still home, whatever. Absorb that, enjoy that moment. I think thinking 10 years out is it's too early, my view.
And I guess what I was thinking in that sense was to try things on the side that you might want to do in retirement, or to start building the relationships that you might want in retirement. So getting out of the tight-knit circle of just work, so that when that time comes 10 years down the road, you've got amazing relationships or, strong seeds planted along the way for whatever it was you chose to do. But I guess that depends on the individual person and what they envision their retirement to look like.
Yeah, that's a little bit different question, right? If the question is, when is the right time to try to expand your interest beyond just your interest at work? I don't think there's any time that's too early for that, right? I mean, life is about a lot more than work. And I guess where I was going was, if you're obsessing about hitting that retirement date and, focused on that 10 years is too early for that. If you're focused on expanding your life outside of work and trying to develop work-life balance and explore different things that you might be interested in, no harm at all in doing that 10 years out. I think that's healthy. I think it adds for a more well-rounded life during those 10 years that you're still working. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, even 20 years in advance. Live life to the fullest and experience all the things that potentially interest you. Try 10, maybe 5 of them will stick. That's fine, right? Explore, experiment, live life to the limit. There's nothing wrong with that.
One of the things I've done all my life, both myself and as I was raising kids, was always look to people who were ahead of me. So, if I had a 2-year-old, I was looking at kids who were 8, 10, 12 to see what the issues were so that I could handle them up front and remove them. Or even as I get older, I'm looking to see what are the issues the elderly have, and I want to get rid of them as much as I can. Have you, through your blog and through your journey, talked to people who were maybe 20 years ahead of you to see what the common issues are and what they're going to face, and maybe thinking about making changes now to preempt that?
You are absolutely singing my tune, Rocky. I talk about, if there's anybody's voice that you're really going to listen to, it's those that have walked the journey before you, and those that are speaking to you with the best intent to share wisdom that they've gained from the path that you've not yet walked. And I do spend a lot of time. I had a really neat old couple. I had a reader that called me up or sent me a text, whatever, email, whatever, and said, "Hey, I'm going to be in town. Can we go out for lunch?" I didn't know the guy. I was like, "Yeah, sure, great." We had a great lunch. We get talking about his parents. His parents are like in their 80s. He's like, "Oh, you should talk to my parents. They're a hoot. They got a great story." I was like, "Yeah." I said, "I'd love to talk to your parents, So he does an introduction thing. I ended up talking to his mom for like an hour and a half on the phone. She's like in her 80s, and we had a great phone call. They've been married, 50-something years. She talks about what it is that made their marriage successful, what made their finances successful, what made them being parents successful. It was absolutely marvelous. So if there's anything that people take away from this podcast, it's reach out to those people that have walked the trail before you and listen to what they have to say. It's an incredible source of learning. So, yeah, I'm all about exactly that.
Did you have any gems you want to share from that conversation? Maybe you don't remember them. That's fine.
Oh, no, I remember the discussion. I think the thing that stuck with me the most about the marriage piece, first of all, was basically be willing to forgive. Marriage is all about compromise. Be willing to sacrifice your wants for those of your spouse, and recognize that no marriage is perfect. You've got to work with another human being, and being flexible in doing that is the key to a good marriage. That stuck with me on that. On the financial side, actually, this was an interesting story. The article I wrote about it was something like, it's never too late to start saving for retirement. This couple was like 49 years old. The husband was 50, the wife was 49. They didn't have a dime saved for retirement, not a dime. And they retired at age 65. And basically what they did, over that 15-year period, they applied the same principle that a lot of these people we talked about earlier, the FIRE community, the retire early, the people that are retiring in their 30s, it's the same concept. It's, okay, save 50% of your income and you can retire in 15 years or whatever the math says. That's what they did. Even if you haven't started and had this whole magic of compounding working for you, it's not too late. And theirs was a case study in a real life example of a couple that had nothing saved at age 50 and got out at 65. And that's the story that their son and I had at lunch. He said, "You got to talk to my parents." It was really amazing to hear their story and how they did that. It's the same principles that we talk about. Spend less than you earn, needs, not wants. I would say those two things were the things that stuck with me from that discussion I had with her.
That's incredible to, at 50, make that kind of a drastic change and have that kind of success. That's an amazing story.
I'll tell you what drove it. This was motivating to me. It was basically one person that they came in contact with. He was a stockbroker, and he went to their church. They somehow got in contact with this guy and sat down and said, "Hey, can we talk to you about our finances? We're not really sure what we're doing, but we know we're not doing very well." That one person was able to influence their life. And I kind of looked at that as motivation for work like I do and work like you do, where we're trying to educate people about these topics. We can influence people, and I hope we do, right? That's why I do what I do. Mine is purely an act of giving back to society. I've learned some stuff. Here, I'll throw it out on the table, eat what you want. But the reality of it was one person that came into their life that made that drastic of a shift in their entire life. So it doesn't take a lot. One small voice at the right time, when somebody's ready to hear it, can change a life.
That last statement is the important part. You have to be ready to hear it, and you have to be willing to hear it.
Yeah.
That's probably the part that's hardest, is to accept the feedback, to listen to the elephant in the room, and to take that advice and then to go take action on it.
Yeah. And it's kind of like what we talked about earlier about our kids never listen to us the way we wish they would. And I was talking to a friend of mine. He's a young father, and he was saying about how he's going to do this and how he's going to do that, how he's going to really teach his kids, all these principles. And I said, you know what? I said, great goal. Pat on the back for having the right attitude. But recognize that your kids are probably not going to be as engaged in this discussion as you wish they would be. And you have to respect that. You have to find a way to speak to people, whether they're kids or adults, it doesn't matter. You need to find a way to speak to them at a point where they're willing to listen. It takes both. You got to be the person presenting and you got to be the person receiving. And both of those have to work for change to happen.
Absolutely. So we've covered a lot of subjects. Is there anything else that we should cover today?
We have covered a lot. It's been a nice chat, Rocky. I've enjoyed it. I'll tell you one thing I would encourage people to do. When you asked the question, this is what popped in my head, so I'll go ahead and say it. What I would encourage people to do, if they're kind of in similar situations to where I am, or where many people are in this pre-retirement, starting to think about it, trying to figure out what it means, but getting close, I would really try to find a way to slow your life down, disconnect for 7 to 10 days, and be really intentional and just spend some time in introspection thinking about what this means to you. A short amount of time of serious thought about it is probably the best advice I can give somebody who's in this stage in life. You can't go into it like my friend did, conference calls, meetings, airports, right to the end of the thing. You've got to take some time to just force yourself to slow down and think about what your life's going to be post-retirement. That's probably the takeaway that I would encourage people to think about.
And I'll expand upon that. I don't think it matters what stage of life you're at. I think the same advice applies. You're going to college, sit down and think about it. You're getting married, sit down and think about the person you're marrying and the fact that you're not going to change them, and are you willing to accept who they are? If you're going to have kids, think about how that's going to dramatically shift your life. In all of life's decisions, I think too often we accept what comes before us instead of sitting down and thinking through it for that week to make sure this is truly what we want and it fits in with our bigger picture.
Wow. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Excellent addition to the thought. Spot on. Absolutely right.
So if people would like to read your blog or connect with you and find you, what is the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, thanks for that, Rocky. I guess pretty straight up, the Retirement Manifesto, just like the Communist Manifesto, it's the retirementmanifesto.com. Everything that I do is there. I've got Twitter, I've got Facebook, but if you go to the retirementmanifesto.com, you can find the links to everything else. Have a look. I've got an email thing. I don't do any spam advertising or anything. I just use that to send out my latest article. But if you sign up for that, you'll get a copy of my net worth template that's free to all my subscribers. So, have a look. I don't really care if you read my stuff or read somebody else's stuff, but I think the important thing is educate yourself, learn as much about this as you can, and take responsibility for your life. And if I can be a small part in helping you do that, I'd be happy to help.
That's awesome. Thank you for being so generous and for helping the audience. I'm sure they truly would appreciate it.
Thank you, Rocky, for having me on your show. I'm sincerely honored. Your show is really becoming a voice in this space. I applaud you for taking it from nothing to a real show, making a material impact in just a year. It's been astounding to watch. I've enjoyed watching you go through it, and I just can't believe that we're sitting here talking and we're doing a podcast together. I love this stuff. I really enjoyed our chat.
Thank you. It's small baby steps. So this is actually being recorded early December, at which point I think I was still freaking out about the fact that I hadn't started my podcast. I think it was about a week or two. It was around December 15th that I sat down with a coach who literally helped me plan the next 2 weeks out to get everything done to launch the podcast, deal with the Christmas holiday, prepare for the robotics championship that we were about to go to. And so, it was like, this is going to be my number one goal. I failed in 16, 17. I'm going to hit this goal. How am I going to get all this done in 2 to 3 weeks? It all came together, and it's been an amazing journey.
And I should say happy, not a birthday, I guess, but a pod birthday, whatever it is. Happy anniversary on your first year with the blog. that's really ironic that it was a year ago that you were going through that. Isn't it amazing how fast life passes us by, right?
It does. It does. It is absolutely amazing. By the time people listen to this, it'll be a while out. They'll be like, "What are they talking about? It's March."
Well, Merry Christmas, and those of you who don't hear it till March, Merry Christmas 2018, I guess. But Rocky, thanks again so much. I've really enjoyed our time, and I look forward to staying in touch with you. I feel like we're friends, and we have a common interest and a common approach to a lot of things. Let's keep in touch, and we'll continue to help each other, help others along their journeys.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much for being here.
Okay. Thank you.
I encourage you to check out Fritz's site, theretirementmanifesto.com. Clearly, where you focus your attention is where you get results. Be intentional in your planning, and your results will be easier to achieve. This week's action step: start researching a part of your life that you want to see change in. Start exploring what it means and what you need to do to bring about that change. Is there someone you know who could benefit from what we talked about today? Please share it. It helps you build social capital and create better relationships and start better conversations with the people you know, and they will appreciate you for it. What's preventing you from moving forward, and who are you putting on your team to help build the life you deserve? Taking no action creates a far worse outcome in life and lots of regrets than trying something and failing. Thanks for listening. You can contact me at Rocky@Richer Soul. Have an abundant week.